What's up, tankers? Togrim here. This is episode 24 of my Road to Unicum, and today we look at the AMX 12T. This is the French Tier 6 light tank that comes after the ELC AMX, and I'm going to discuss tips and tactics for playing this tank effectively. I was able to get my third mark of excellence in my first 161 battles using silver ammo only. This tank has kind of a steep learning curve because it doesn't play like other tanks. The gun is unusually good for a tier 6 light tank. It features a 6-shot autoloader that can deal 800 damage in about 10 seconds, and with a fully trained crew, the clip will reload in under 20 seconds. The silver ammo penetration relative to its peers is pretty solid at 144, and if you're firing the gold APCR ammo, it goes all the way up to 202, which is just crazy for a tank that gets tier 7 to tier 9 matchmaking as a light tank. Between the high rate of fire and the fast clip reload, you can easily burn through the low ammo capacity of 30 shells, so you want to be very intentional when you're firing. The stock suspension will allow you to mount the upgraded modules as well as 3 pieces of equipment: the optics, gun rammer, and gun laying drive, and binocs. If you want to mount vents, you will have to research the upgraded suspension. I actually use binoculars over vents because this tank is a very poor active scout for reasons we'll talk about in the video. The max gun depression is very poor at only -4 degrees, and this is a rear mounted turret, so it's not a very good hill fighter. Now, compared to other videos, what I'm going to do is show illustrative examples from 4 battles. This tank isn't really built to brawl. Sometimes what I'll do is, early in a battle, especially in encounter mode, I'll come up and brawl with other light tanks, and the 2 friendlies in front of me are actually acting as hard cover. So I stay up here just long enough to burn down an enemy French light tank, and as their bigger tanks roll up to the top of the hill, it's time for me to turn and bail and get out of here. Now, look how long it takes me to get my tank turned around and to accelerate. So this tank does not have very good agility. The acceleration is very sluggish, so you need to avoid getting into trouble spots, because if you're in trouble and you try to drive away from them, a lot of times you won't make it out. This tank is pretty brittle. If you know where a tank is and they don't have you spotted, with an autoloader you can draw them in. So I'm letting this T-29 drive across the middle of the street because I know, since his turret's probably not facing at me, I'll be able to get off at least 2 shots before he even fires. He rushes his shot, and then for my 4th penetrating shot I wait until his hull is pointed towards me so that he doesn't have the benefit of hull angling. Now, while this tank's acceleration is kind of sluggish, the top end speed is pretty good, and this will allow you to flex and fill holes or to selectively active scout when you need it. One thing you'll notice is that if the turret of the enemy tank is pointed perpendicular from you, so they're not facing you, a lot of times you'll be able to safely fire off 2 shots before they can even return fire. And in this case, the Soviet IS tank rushed his shot, and my team finishes him off. Now, I've been clicking on the middle of the map around E5 and E6 since the first 30 seconds of our deployment, because a lot of our heavies are kind of lemming training towards hill, and this has left us very thin in the middle. And our light tank tries to go down there to stop the bleeding, and he helps to get one of their light tanks destroyed, but one of their lights is very close to spotting our RD. So I'm flexing back. This does take some time. The top end speed is in the upper 50s, around 60 kilometers per hour, which is relatively fast, but I'm covering a lot of ground to try to save our RD. Now, one thing is our friendly VK German tank. He's a tier 8 heavy tank. He's kind of cowering behind the railroad here instead of trying to keep that light tank lit so that one of our other friendly tanks has a chance to shoot him. I come over the rails, pick off that light tank, and then I'm going to go ahead and flex and fill this middle section of the map so that I can light the tanks in front of me, just south of me, for our tanks on hill to be able to fire on. And there's another good example of being able to safely fire off 2 shots at a tank that's not pointing its turret towards you, and then as I back up, I keep that building between us so that he can't shoot through it, but I need to pull far enough down below the lip of the hill that the tanks on hill can't fire at me. And I know that I'm going to outspot the Super Pershing, and I have a building between us, so what this will allow me to do is come up high enough on the hill behind this soft cover, and I'm not going to get spotted from the tanks on the hill. The distance is too great, and the AMX 12T has excellent camo, so until I start firing, there's almost no possibility that they're going to be able to see me. The German tank that I talked about earlier is showing very poor situational awareness. He pulled up so far to kind of chase after that Super Pershing, and in doing so, he was blocking off my shots on the hill, and he really should have been firing on the hill too. He came up so high that once he was spotted, he was taking fire not just from the Super Pershing in front of him, but from tanks on the hill. And I mention this because as a light tank, you're very brittle, and you have to be very aware of what your friendly tanks are doing and which tanks are or are not likely to give you support. I am too close to this T-29 and the Super Pershing, so they're spotting me and I can't leverage my good vision control because I'm too close. So as I exit the situation, I'm keeping this rock in between us so that they can't fire on me, and then I'm going to cut to the west a little bit at a diagonal, and as I'm moving away, I am actively spotting the T-29 for my friendly tanks to have fire, and I'm going to wait until I get in a little bit of a better position to fire on the T-29. Obviously I don't want to get lit when I'm firing on him, and ideally, because the gun handling on this tank is not that good, I want to have enough time to come up and over these ridges so that I can, deal with the poor gun depression and the poor gun elevation and get the aiming reticle fully aimed in so that I can try to land all 6 shots. The first 2 shots I was aiming a bit high toward the back of the turret, and while that will penetrate, the better shot selection is down near the engine deck, because the shots there will not only have the chance to damage the engine, but can set the tank on fire, which is how I killed that T-29. One thing to be aware of, the gun handling is not good on the move, so you want to be careful. I do end up, after shooting this first shot, you can see I actually have to drive forward to get the gun elevation high enough to aim at the arty, and then I turn on auto aim, but as I'm bouncing around here and moving, I'm kind of conscious of that and firing carefully, because you can easily burn through a lot of shells quickly and not hit a target even if you're relatively close. And I should have driven over and hugged the side of this arty as soon as possible. I probably would have avoided that shot from the Super Pershing. Because this tank is so brittle and the gun handling is poor, and in some cases you'll be matched up against Tier 9 tanks, you need to be very conscious of all this and stay out of heavy brawling lanes. Early in this encounter match, I go to the top of the hill along with a friendly 1390, and I'm thinking I can, potentially damage other enemy light tanks who come up here, but the thing I have to be really aware of is their T-54, because as a top tier medium tank, that tank can really bully lower tier light tanks, and as we come up here, it turns out that their T-54 is the first tank spotted, and he can two-shot me. This is not a situation that I can stay in. Even if I had gold clip loaded, it would make no sense to stay up here, especially since he's going to have other supporting tanks coming up quickly. So I opt to relocate to a place which will allow me to have safe flanking fire on these tanks. The great thing about having such a high rate of fire gun is that you can punish an enemy multiple times whenever they're exposed to you, and if you get them tracked, you can pretty much keep them immobilized for the duration of your clip, and then for however many seconds while your clip is reloading that it takes them to repair. The 12T is a really good opportunistic finisher. In this case, I've still got 5 out of the 6 shells, so I can do almost 700 damage, and this Jagdtiger is way overextended, so I'm staying down below the ridge so he can't see me, and then when I come over the top here, initially I fire into the back of his superstructure and then into his engine deck. Where I should be aiming, since he's turning, is right into that drive wheel, so I track him and he can't go anywhere, and I can safely fire off the 5 shots that I had in that clip and then back out. And obviously in a situation like this, the 3 arties, so I don't want to sit and spot too much, and as I'm backing away, I'm kind of cutting at an angle, not moving in a predictable zigzag per se in case one of their arties is targeting me, and then before the clip is fully reloaded, I move up top here and quickly snapshot him, and then it's time to relocate again. One thing you'll want to do, because the clip reload is so fast, is if you think you're 15 seconds or more from getting into an enemy engagement, just hit the reload button. So I'm going into this fight here with only 4 of 6 shots loaded, and I make a really bad decision here. I opt to try to brawl with the 251, which is a light tank that is 2 tiers higher than me, has significantly higher alpha, and even though he's damaged, has more hit points to work with. So I chose to brawl with him. It's a very foolish decision. Then I get clicked by arty, and then after I repair my track, for some inexplicable reason, I charge the 251, and I really should have backed up down the slope into the water where I could stay alive and continue spotting for my team. Thankfully, that mistake didn't cost us the battle, but it was very sloppy play on my part. If you're on airfield spawn from the east side, this rock and the bush right beside it is a fantastic place to spot and snipe from, because whenever you can spot targets with your good vision control, get a few shots off before they'll even spot you, and then tuck into the rock until you're invisible again. And like with this T-150, I fire the first shot and Suk Sense isn't even activating. So while this T-150 knows where I am in general, he can't see me and he blind fires into the bush. This is a great sniping spot, and I think if you're a light tank driver, your preference would be to spawn on the eastern side of airfield as opposed to the west. Because of the good vision control, you'll do things such as outspot enemy tank destroyers, and this allows me, because I know where he is and he doesn't know where I am, it gives me time to go ahead and reposition and get all the way at his backside. Since the T-28 has very, very strong frontal armor and it's just bounce city, but here I can wait until he's fully facing away from me. I still bounce a shot, but the next couple ones go through, and then using the good mobility of this tank, I can reposition once we've got the T-28 spotted and then safely fire down on him. And that's one thing which is really important. The gun depression on this tank is pretty poor, but in a lot of situations you can offset that. In this case I'm facing a very slow tank, so I'm going to be able to fire all 3 shots before he can even turn and face me, and since I'm shooting down on top of the armor on his tank, those are very easy penetrations. Even with 144 penetration, that's going to go right through. You want to be very careful, since the tank only has 30 shells, of trying to let them aim in as much as possible. So the first shot that I fired on this Leopard was a total waste. Like the aiming reticle was still about 3/4 full and the shot just sailed. I'm taking my time with these later shots, and that Leopard definitely did a very poor job. Once he's taking fire and he can see the rate of fire, you can probably guess that it's me firing at him. He should have backed away instead of backing up perpendicular to me, which allows me a steady stream of fire to go ahead and pull away below the ditch where I can't hit him. So I mentioned that the gun depression can definitely be an issue with this tank, but you can try to find terrain where you can work around this. So I've got this hill here which is really good hard cover, and the crown of the hill is surrounded by soft cover. So whenever I drop from their vision control, I know I'll be able to get up on top of the hill. They won't see me, and this will give me the first shot advantage, and I can start firing my gun until I feel like I'm at meaningful risk of getting fired at, especially after I get lit. In this case, notice I ignore the AT tank destroyer that's out in the field. That tank is tremendously slow, and I know that my heavy tanks are going to be able to fire at his rear and pick him off. So I'm choosing the easier shot of firing at that tank destroyer. I think that was a 152 on his fully exposed side. You definitely don't want to trade with tanks that have a fast reload like this Bulldog, but a friendly Bulldog comes up, so I'm able to peek out from behind this rock and land 3 consecutive shots for the kill. In some tanks that have really good gun handling and a high rate of fire, basically non-autoloaders, whether they're lights or medium tanks, you can circle strafe a target, which means, as you're driving around him, fire at him, especially if you've got auto aim on. I don't recommend doing this with the French light tanks, neither the 1390 or this 12T that I've shown, in these last 2 videos, because the gun handling is bad. The gun handling on the 12T is actually better than the 1390, and this gun, I believe it has an accuracy of .36 compared to .38 for the 1390. And I'm firing all these shots into the rear of this tank, hoping to set his engine on fire or at least do engine damage. And the T-34 has very slow both hull traverse and turret traverse, so I'm able to get on the other side of his tank. And I don't want to get in the way of my tanks firing at him, but I just kind of wiggle around back and forth until they're able to finish him off. So I hope this video was helpful. Please leave your comments and feedback below, and I'll continue to make some more videos on French tanks as I move up the line. Take care.